Afternoon, everyone. My name is Hunter Cheney. I'm one of the directors for the American Heritage Museum and the Collings Foundation. A little background on the Collings Foundation and the American Heritage Museum. The Collings Foundation was established in 1979 as a 501c3 educational nonprofit foundation. Bob and Caroline Collings are the founders. They actually still live here on the property, and you might have heard Bob doing the announcing as part of the reenactment. And so the goal, the purpose of the foundation is, of course, the preservation and exhibition of very rare historical artifacts and major historical artifacts, because we're dealing with aircraft and tanks, complex machines, and also the organization of living history events and educational programs like this, both designed not only as a means to better understand history, but we want to provide an environment that excites people to want to learn more. Starting in the early 80s, one big part of our program was the National Wings of Freedom Tour. So think of this as a national tour of World War II bomber and fighter aircraft. It's kind of like a flying memorial for World War II veterans. So from the early 80s all the way up until 2019, that was a real big program that we operated. The tour itself would fly around the country, visiting about 110 cities across the United States, and seen by over 4 million people annually. In 2009, we were selected as the recipients of one of the world's largest tank collections. And this came by a fellow by the name of Jacques Littlefield. Jacques and the Collings Foundation went back some time, and basically Jacques passed away from pancreatic cancer. His foundation selected us to receive this tremendous collection. And what we ended up doing is we held on to what was Jacques' most historically important core of that collection. And that's what makes up pretty much about 80% of what you see in the new American Heritage Museum. The American Heritage Museum itself opened up in 2019. And then, of course, we had COVID. Closed the museum down for close to 2 years and opened up again. So it's still a very new museum. We have plans to expand out. We have one of the world's largest collections of operational historic aircraft, and that collection is coming here as part of our expansion. So we're very excited about that. Now here in front of me are two men that served in World War II. They're about to share these memories with you to help us keep this history alive. Before they begin, let me bring us back to the 1930s. Roughly 20 years after the end of World War I, tribalism, imperialism, fascism, and terror had reared its ugly head again. After being voted as party chairman, Adolf Hitler abolished democracy in Germany and set up a fascist state, espousing a new world order that promoted a Jewish conspiracy theory and denounced internationalism. In Italy, Mussolini's dictatorship quickly aligned with the Nazis, spreading an ideology of blind nationalism, racism, hatred, and imperialism across Europe, east, west, north, and south. Germany's alliance with Russia fell apart at the onset of Operation Barbarossa, where the Russians quickly found partnering with Germany was not within their best interests. Brutal nationalism, imperialism, and militarism had seeped into Asia. Japanese Emperor Hirohito and his general Tojo rampaged through China and its Asian and Pacific neighbors, oppressing, enslaving, and killing at every opportunity. In 1940, Germany, Italy, and Japan had formed a formal alliance, the Tripartite Pact, and the Axis's murderous power was cemented. A brutal reign of terror and oppression looked to be unstoppable. On December 7th, 1941, 84 years ago, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and we knew the time had come that we could not let this continue. The freedoms, the liberties, and the pursuits of happiness of people at home and all around the world were in jeopardy. Americans felt this with such conviction that our sons, our daughters, brothers and sisters went off to foreign lands to serve, to resist, to fight, to push back. As a nation, we came together knowing that if we had lost, all our country stands for would be lost. Young men and women from all walks of life gave themselves, made the ultimate sacrifice so their children, so our children would not have to endure such horrors and oppressive autocratic governments. On the ground, sea, and in the air, our veterans endured dangers beyond belief, day after day, in the roughest conditions imaginable, so we can continue to enjoy the freedoms that we all cherish. Remembering World War II is crucial for several reasons, encompassing historical, educational, moral, and social aspects. Understanding the historical context and events of World War II help us comprehend the profound impact we had on sharing the modern world. It led to significant geopolitical changes, including the emergence of the United States and the Soviet Union as superpowers, the establishment of the United Nations, and of course the beginning of the Cold War. By studying these events, we can gain insights into the origins of contemporary international relations and the global political dynamic. Remembering World War II serves its educational purpose by highlighting the consequences of totalitarian and autocratic regimes, aggressive expansionism, unchecked nationalism, and the dissolvements of democracy. The war demonstrated the catastrophic incomes of ideological extremisms and the importance of safeguarding democratic values and human rights. By learning about the causes and consequences of the war and knowing the effects and dangers of political leaders who lead through fear, hatred, and lies, future generations can be better equipped to recognize and counteract similar threats, thereby promoting global peace and stability. As children of this generation, it's up to us to keep this history close, to remind ourselves freedom is not free, and democracy is very fragile. Never forget the horrors of war. Never forget what happens when tyrannical leaders divide their people with tribalism, conspiracy, hate, lies, bigotry, and dissension. Never forget the sacrifices made for our freedom. We must remember the lessons taught by World War II, or history will, without a doubt, repeat itself. We're so lucky to have these veterans here today. They risked their lives for us, and so it's a great honor to hear their memories. So what we'll do is we'll start with Mr. Castor Salemi. He was part of the 251st Field Artillery. I think Castor is now 103. And then, We'll start with Castor. Castor, maybe you can run over a little bit about your service, some of the memories you had. Then we'll move on to Mr. Bill Soule, who is part of the 734th Field Artillery. Bill, how old are you now? 102. 102. So, Castor, let me turn your microphone on here. There you go. So, Castor, tell us a little bit about what you were doing. I think you must have been about at the age of 18, around there, 17 or 18 when you entered the service. Hold the mic up to your mouth there, Bill.
I was older than 17. In 1941, I was 20 years old. 19 years old, sorry. And I was at a basketball game at the high school when Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And then I went to the Navy recruitment, tried to enlist in the Navy, and they, of course, wouldn't take me. They said I was colorblind. Of course, later on in the year, they took anybody that could walk. From then on, I got a job at Sperry Corporation and working on Northern bomb sites. But then I was drafted in 1942 and in 1943, and I trained in Paris, Texas for about a year, and then across the Pacific Ocean to New Guinea. Nobody realizes, I think, how big the Pacific Ocean is. It took 30 days on a troop ship to reach New Guinea from California. And it's pretty tough not seeing land for 30 days. Of course, the troop ship did not have fresh water. We had to take a shower when it rained. It was tough. But then when we reached New Guinea, I thought it was tough then. It became even tougher because the rations we were given were from World War I. British rations that the Australians provided for the troops in New Guinea. Most of the effort for the war was going toward Europe, understandably. And we had some minor skirmishes with the Japanese on New Guinea, and we trained for the invasion of the Philippines. We landed on the western coast of the Philippines and on a troop ship and in Gulf. And according to schedule, something goes wrong all the time. And as my vehicle was told all the communications equipment, as it drove off the plank in the craft, it sank in a mud hole, and I lost all the equipment that I was assigned to take care of. So I had to wait on the beach for 3 days until I was resupplied with new equipment. Then we headed over toward Manila, and Manila was totally destroyed by the Japanese. At this time, I think the Japanese had realized that they were going to win the war, and they kept retreating from Manila to the north, and we kept chasing them. And we were in constant combat in that. Every day, we were firing our 105 howitzers, and in some cases that were on the mountaintops on either side of it, held on by the Japanese, but we managed to get through. One thing I forgot to mention is that New Guinea was tough on troops. Most every soldier got malaria. We were giving Ativan tablets, which the symptoms of malaria, but did not take it away or cure it. And when these soldiers got home, they all came down with malaria. I was fortunate in that I did not get malaria because mosquitoes don't like me. I rarely get bitten by a mosquito. But I did get another serious thing called jungle rot, which is actually a fungus, and almost everybody got fungus to some degree. I got it badly, and toward the end of the war, in August of 43, 45, when we were in Philippines, 45, toward the end of 45, I gotten so bad that I couldn't walk, and I came home on a hospital ship, and I still get reenactments of that fungus once in a while. But luckily, I got home, and I'm happy to be here, and happy to see you all.
We'll come back in a little bit with some questions for you guys. Hold it right up to your mouth. So, Bill, you were about 16 or 17 when you entered the service too, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, my mother had to sign for me. I hadn't reached 18 yet. So at that time, we had to sign your mother to join.
So your mom had to sign the paperwork.
Right, she had to sign it, yeah. So my buddy was going ahead of me, and I wanted to go with him. So we were going to join the Navy. We went up to Boston to the recruiting station. We passed the physical. No, we passed the intelligence test, but we couldn't pass the physical. I was missing a roller in my back teeth. My buddy had just shot his foot off, so he couldn't take him either. So we said, to hell with the Navy, let's get in the Army.
So you tell the folks, when you joined the Army, tell the folks where you started training. Where were you deployed once you entered the Army?
We went up to Fort Devens, and we shipped out of there, went down to Texas, Camp Maxey, Texas, and that's where we had our maneuvers and our basic training. And from there we went down to Louisiana for a war game, and it was miserable down there. So after that, we shipped back to Camp Brewer, which was an artillery camp, and the guys broke up into our batteries, A, B, and C battery, and they would go to train on the 155 millimeter cannon. It was the biggest one we had. But from there, we shipped up to New York. We got on the ship and took a convoy over to England. We ran into 2 northeast storms going across the Atlantic. It's a wonder we survived. And the German subs were up there too. On each side of our convoy, we had what they call tin cans, Navy tin cans, and they would circle in and out of the convoy. We detected a submarine off, so the whole convoy had to turn south towards the Azores, and they made our trip. We were on the ocean for 12 days. up and down the water. It was terrible, really. We got to Italy. We did some more training in England. Got all new equipment, new trucks, new artillery and everything. And then we were stationed in Trowbridge, England. That's east of London. At that time, the Germans had stopped the bombing. So we didn't, So then we boarded the landing craft, the Higgins landing craft. And some of the officers landed on the LST with all the trucks and everything. We went across the channel at night. Channel was full of mines. How we made it over these, it was a miracle, really.
Bill, do you remember, was this right after the Normandy landings that you made the trip across the channel, or was it
Yeah,
during?
it was afterwards. It was 2 weeks afterwards.
2 weeks after the initial landings,
We
yeah.
landed in Omaha Beach.
Yeah. And so what group were you with when you crossed the channel? You were with so you were part of the artillery unit, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so once you got over and landed on the beach, what was it like once you got on Normandy?
Well, back then, it was the grave registration people had cleaned the beach up because there was bodies all over the place. They didn't want us to see it as we were landing because of the psychological end of it, So they cleaned the beaches up, and then we started from there, And that's when we started battling all the battles, all across France. We got near Germany, and we were in the city of Nancy, France. And if you get on the map, you can find it. From there, one night, my captain came up to me and says, "Bill, get your Jeep ready." We're going on a trip. I didn't know about it. They didn't tell me what it was either. So we traveled up to Luxembourg overnight, patrol, blackout, couldn't see anything, We got up to Luxembourg, and that's where the Battle of the Bulge finally started. So they assigned us to a small town, and then Patton wanted all the artillery pieces he could get up there, because they didn't know what the hell was going on, really. So we started firing all through the Battle of the Bulge, And one day the sun was really bad, the weather was terrible. We had inches of snow, one thing, and I felt sorry for the infantry. I really did, because they were taking a beating, really. So anyway, we got up. The weather changed, and the sun came out. So we were standing around, just ignoring the weather. All of a sudden, we could hear a deep, like a groaning sound. And after a while, a whole group of B-17s come right over the tree. And we saw them go by. And one of the B-17s had the tail end of it shot off, so we could the guy got killed. And there was big holes in the fuselage. And that plane was going down. And we all saw that guy's not going to make it. So after that, we fought our way back towards Germany. And we got just inside of Germany. Trieste, I think the name of the town was. And we went down into France, Frankfurt. We worked our way over to Czechoslovakia.
Hold it up, Bill, so we can hear.
We worked our way up to Czechoslovakia, and that's when the war ended right there. But in the meantime, Eisenhower infantry had not captured, but overtook this enemy war camp, not labor camp. And he wanted all the GIs in the field to see what was going on in that camp. He couldn't believe it.
Camp was that?
It was all Audrey camp. It was a labor camp. And this is where all the captains, Americans, everybody was in there. And we went into the camp. Before we got there, our captain gave us privates to go to see the camp. So we said, yeah, we'll go. And we went up the highway, and all you could smell was an awful smell. So we got there. You can see why Eisenhower wanted everybody to see what it's about. Because Eisenhower told the guys, this is what the hell we're fighting for. Because back then, a lot of these armies were getting R&R, and they were going to Paris and raising hell in Paris. And that's what Eisenhower wanted the guys up there to see what was going on. So we went in. Jesus, I couldn't believe it. There were dead people all over the place. Human beings like you and I walking around skull and bone. And really, when I've been there, it was terrible. It was smell was terrible. And there were dead bodies laying all over the place. So, let's get started here. When some of the prisoners died, some of them died from typhoid. So they died, and they couldn't bury them fast enough. So what they did, they took them out the back of the barracks and burned them. Put them on railroad tracks, and piled the bodies on and burned them. So the Russians were history fighting the Germans all over the place. And we ended up about 20 miles from Berlin. That's when the war started. We didn't let Americans go into Berlin. They wanted the Russians to take care of it. So after that, the war ended. And then they were trying to ship guys home as fast as they could, because there was thousands of us over there. So, in the meantime, they would give us, I guess, the Army gave all the outfits different jobs to do to keep us busy, you know. So we took care of this place, prison camp. There were a lot of people in it, so that was our job to take care of them. So after a while, the announcement came down that we had to move out because we were in East German territory, and we had to get out of there.
This was the time that the Germans now were starting to come from the east and get into Berlin, right? So you were instructed not to deal with Russians at that.
No,
yeah.
Why did they do that?
Yeah.
We deserved that. They figured the Russians took us to such a power and they wanted to tell them the service.
Yeah.
A lot of guys were
So you knew you could hear the Russians coming in from there. Yeah.
Well, we got back to France again. We shipped out.
And shipped out after that. So we're talking late 1945 then. And you came back to the States. How long were you in the service after you got back? You got out as soon as you could. Hold it up so we can hear.
The reason I got back was in high school I met this girl and we were going together. And we were going to get married before we went over. And her father talked us out of us. Because he was in World War I, because he knew what was on the road. So when I got back, we was back to about a month.
I hope it was a lovely long marriage. And well, thank you very much for sharing that. Talk like, put the mic like this, Bill, so we can, that way we can hear you a little bit.
I was in high school. Oh, that way. We were in junior high school, and it was during the 38 hurricane. So we got home, all the trees were coming down, and after the weather cleared, we went out, the whole group of us went out the back of the house, and we played sandlot baseball. And while we were out there, we were playing, and all of a sudden we'd hear this loud humming noise. We didn't know what it was. Back then, 1937, there were not hardly any planes around. So we didn't know what it was. And all of a sudden, one of the guys says, "Oh, look." And here comes this big dirigible right over the trees. The Hindenburg. Remember the Hindenburg? He's going the way over us. And we looked up and we could see the swastika on the back of it. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know what the hell it was. You know, because the war had just started and we did not, we were as kids, you know. So we watched it go over, you know. And, that same day, that plane tried to land in Lakehurst, New Jersey. You probably know some of the history about it. And when it went in and it docked, a guy dropped a rope down and the whole thing blew up. It was on the news back then. Yeah, so not just one of my stories.
So I have a question for Castor. If you want to give that microphone to Castor. So my late father-in-law was a Marine in the Pacific. He was in every major Allied campaign, island hopping campaign through the Pacific. One thing I remember him mentioning, and that he carried this for the rest of his life, is that he always needed, wanted, and had to have a dry pair of socks. And I kept thinking, Castor, with the one thing that I hear of from all the veterans that go through the Pacific Theater is that the moisture was inescapable. And then the sand and the heat made for moving equipment and getting around very difficult. That's basically what you experienced?
That's true, but let me expand that a little bit. The Army issued us boots, but in the Pacific, when you were in the Pacific, it always rained every day at some point. Maybe for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but every day you got some rain. And if water got in your boots, it stayed in there, and that's where the problem starts. Later on, I understand the Army issued boots that the water can get out from the boots.
Yeah. And that's basically what a lot of the guys suffered from, like, I would consider like the most severe forms of athlete's foot. and it would be debilitating at a certain point. And it sounds like you experienced that.
Well, first of all, it's not athlete's foot. It's a blood fungus.
Yeah.
You never get rid of it. It stays in your blood. So I never give blood anywhere because I know I have that fungus in my bloodstream.
Wow.
It hit me pretty badly on my hands and my feet. Like I say, I couldn't walk. I came home on a hospital ship, and part of the bad things that happened, we got caught in the aftermath of a typhoon with huge waves of 40 foot, and to this day I won't go on any kind of ship that goes in the ocean.
I can imagine. And it sounds like Bill had suffered kind of some really heavy seas heading over the Atlantic as well. But the seas were really rough when they were sending you out to the islands, right?
No, the Pacific was rather calm.
Good.
It was only when we hit the typhoon when I was on the way home on a hospital ship. And then another thing when we landed in California, they brought us into a big hole like this, and they had food on counters everywhere. Help yourself. Of course, I hadn't tasted milk for 3 years.
So must have been.
I headed to the bottle of milk, and unfortunately it was, what do you call it, sour milk?
Yeah.
Oh boy, did I get sick.
Yeah.
Then I got on a hospital train. They took me to White Sulphur Springs, where I stayed for a while to recoup.
To recuperate.
Yeah,
Great.
I still get breakouts, but you get very human, whatever.
You did for years probably after that, right?
Yes, I still do.
Yeah. I have a question for Bill, and then I'll take some questions from the audience. So, Bill, I recall when you're talking about as you're coming up into the Ardennes area, this is the last major offensive that Germany was putting up. This is the point where Germany's like, we're going to pull everything out and try and stop or slow the Allied advancement. And it actually looked as if they were going to be successful if the weather was bad. So you remember the talking about, so try and get away from my feedback here. Bill had mentioned about, you realize the Germans had pretty much surrounded the Allies, that ball is going around. And the weather was so bad that the planes weren't able to actually bomb the targets, right?
We couldn't, no.
Yeah, and so that, seeing those bombers must have been a real highlight, because that means that now we have support to try and break out of this, what looked like a dire situation.
Those bombers were coming back from Berlin, bombing Berlin. That's right.
When you went into the Battle of the Bulge, what was your gear like? Were you equipped? Did you have like some jackets and stuff?
And the first part of it, we didn't. Because when we first went into the battle, the winter hadn't, snow hadn't started. It was, it was cold out. But then it started raining, and the rain turned to snow. And we ended up with 8 to 10 inches of snow. And the infantry was the one that took a bad lick about it. And they were freezing. Like Casper said, you couldn't change your socks. It got soaked, and your feet would start freezing. So a lot of the guys actually froze to death up there.
So I'll take a couple questions if anyone has some from the audience. Why don't you come up a little bit and I'll give you a microphone.
My name is Nick Jakes, and were either of you in a hand-to-hand combat with the Japanese and the Nazis?
I was in an artillery outfit, so that means we were usually about 3 to 5 miles back from the front line. But we were in constant battle. I mean, we fired over 100,000 rounds of level 5 ammunition during this period in the Philippines.
Because you were also
Yeah. Well, I gotta tell you a story about that. We pulled into this area and the artillery was setting up their guns. And we were going to feed them at a field kitchen. The cook asked me if I'd take my truck down. We had a river down near us. Take the truck down to get about 6 or 7 5-gallon cans of water because we needed it for the kitchen. So I got my buddy and we drove down. We're down to the bank. The bank was steep. We get the water. All of a sudden, while we were down there, we could hear some shots. And we thought we were surrounded by Germans. So we crept up to the top of the bank and peered over. And coming out of the woods, there was a whole 16 or 20, I forget now, of Germans surrendering at a white flag. So they came down out of the woods, and my buddy and I both put our rifle down, and they surrendered to us. So I got a picture of us taking the prisoners in. So later on, we found out it was one of those Jews that had shot a gunnery sergeant and killed him. You know, and I didn't find out. I was so mad. I really was ready to shoot that guy for fun of him. That was one of the stories.
And you have some pictures, I think, after we're done. If you want to show a couple of the pictures to anyone who wants to see it, you're welcome to come up after. Another question? Anyone else? Yeah, come on up here. Let's have your name and your question.
So, my name is Escotranus. I just wanted to know, what was it like when you got home? Was it like, were you celebrated, or was it more of like just like returning home?
Actually, since the war with the Japanese didn't end until later in 45, when I got home, all the celebration of the war being over was much later. And it happened much earlier.
When I get back, it's kind of quiet, you know, because of war and all that. But all I could think was getting to my girlfriend. Incidentally, she wrote me every day.
One thing I gotta tell you that one of the things we found that being in the Army, or I suppose any of the services, when you got home, you missed the camaraderie you find that you had while you were in the service. And it was very common for us to try and grab anybody, any veteran friend we knew, and get together. Yes, I did that for years after I arranged functions to get all these veterans together.
Yeah, we had a couple of reunions. Yeah.
My name is Walter, and the question is, did you guys experience PTSD when you guys came home, and how did you deal with it? Or like combat fatigue,
first thing I thought about was getting married to my girlfriend. Yeah, my father-in-law had a job already waiting for me when I got home. So I was a little lucky, because there was very few jobs around. You couldn't buy a house, you couldn't buy a car, or went to Disney. The GI Bill gave the government GIs so much money and they could go out and buy a house. And where I live, you're going to see a lot of the smaller houses already there. The GIs built them, So anyway, he got me a job at a tennis racket shop, and we were making tennis rackets. So I had a good job, And then,
No, didn't suffer me that, nor did any of the family friends that I knew.
My name's Shay. This is a question for Bill. Well, I know Cassidy probably didn't have that many kind of experiences with the civilian populations on the islands, but Bill, did you have any kind of experiences when you were in the ordnance area with the civilian population?
over in Belgium, yes. Yes, I did, yeah. Well, back then, we didn't know about half of the people in Belgium were Jewish sympathizers. All of a sudden, the Belgians were standing near the woods and said, we saw this little girl coming through the woods, and we didn't know what it was about. She little about she was like this. She wanted us to go with her. But we went through the woods, and her house was just on the other side of the woods. So we went over the house, and the owner and her friend invited us in. We didn't know about the sympathizing of the prisoners. We didn't know about it. We invited us in. And we went in, and she said, "You want like that? You want to do?" Sure. We bought some tobacco, made a potato bar. No, I was. They were sympathizing with us, sure. Yeah. Well, friends too. Friends was like that, you know?
My name's Brian, and my question is for both of you guys. When you first went over there, did any of the veterans that experienced combat or have been in theater for a while give you any words of advice? When Castor, you get over to New Guinea, it's a pretty tough place to operate, and Bill, when you get to France, and I guess this is a follow-up question for Castor, what was it like dealing with the natives? Did they use them for scouts and carrying the ammunition and all the supplies in New Guinea and the Philippines?
didn't speak any English at all. So we had no contact with any native people other than the military. However, the change in the Philippines, we rarely saw civilians there because they hated the Japanese very, very much. Japanese treated them very poorly and or badly. And we would have our meals served when there's a lull in the firearms, and whenever we had left over, we would save for the civilians that come out of the jungle, and we give them what we had left over. But they were always out of sight. Very rarely saw any of the civilians. Yeah, they didn't have much. They lived in straw or bamboo huts, and they had very little. However, they did speak English, which was great. Yes, the Filipinos are taught English as well as their native language, Tagalog.
I'm Rowan, and I'd like to know what weapons you were issued when you entered service.
We had an old World War I rifle. Springfield. We never got to fire it except once when we wanted to see how to earn your pins. And we're shooting at a target. But other than that, we didn't get our weapons until we reached New Guinea. And I was given a carbine, which is a small rifle, 30 caliber, very light. And in fact, if you come down to my table in the main museum, I have a rifle there you can pick up and look at.
Oh, everything. The first thing they gave us was a Springfield rifle, which was the best one. Then they gave us a Garand rifle, which was a lot heavier. And then they gave us a carbine. I got pretty good with a carbine. Because back in civilian life, my buddy and I used to go out in the woods and shoot squirrels. So I got pretty good at it. And then they gave us a bazooka. And it was one of the first type of bazookas they had. And every time they fired it, they did something. And then they gave us a hand grenade. A hand grenade. Do you know what the hand grenades do? Yeah. So we got down in the hole. The hand grenade. And then, we spent a lot of time on the rifle range. And I got a couple of medals for that too. And then the rest of the battalion was learning how to use 155mm cannons. And that's, I got all through training and then we went back up to the ship.
so it was very hard for you. I understand his father-in-law, he was blessed with a job, but how did you feel kind of coming back and not having, I guess, yes, exactly. And second of all, I would just like to truly thank you for coming here and speaking with us and for my friend. And that's very heartfelt. And speaking of speaking, thank you.
Actually, I did not. I did manage to get jobs very quickly. But going back to the being in the army, I think I would recommend that every young person have some military training for at least a period of a year minimum. And the reason I say that is it's where you learn how to get along with people of all types. When I first went in, there were only 9 of us from New York, very not highly, but educated. And the rest were from Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida. Some of them couldn't read, some couldn't write, some never wore shoes. So we learned how to get along with them, and we fraternized with them, and you got to depend on them, and you knew that they would have your back when you were in trouble.
Bill, I know you went right in to snatch your sweetheart and went right into work at that point. One more question. Maybe we'll take one from the back. Does anyone have any questions in the back there? I'll take one from the young fellow in the back row there. Come on over here. Let's see if we can get some of the younger folks to ask some of the questions here. So state your name and the question, please.
I'm Jack, and I wanted to know what was the closest encounter with death you had in the war.
This is a tough question, and of course, Bill touched on this a little bit going into one of the work camps. But the question is, how close were you to the bad parts of the war, the death, seeing dead bodies, and having to deal with that? Did you see a lot of that?
We saw a lot of dead bodies. We had a major battle we fought in the Philippines was at Malay Pass. We were instructed by the headquarters that absolutely no disfigurement of any dead bodies of Japanese, which was a court-martial offense if you were caught doing that. So we would have to dig with our tractors, we dug trenches and buried the dead Japanese, because we beat them at that battle. And it was a tough battle. We fought for a couple of days, constant battle, firing, and that was when you don't wear clothes, you don't change, not that you don't wear clothes, but you don't change clothes. And you got really tired after 3 days.
Bill, I don't know if you want to touch on that anymore, but you had mentioned going into, what was the name of the camp that you went into again? Pick up the microphone going. Odrith, yeah. And that was like a work concentration camp.
It was a slave camp.
Slave camp. So were civilians in this camp, or was it captured?
No, just men, only men.
Only men. And where were they from? Do you know? They were from all over the place? Oh, sure, you can call them. Yeah, it's the technology is just as it was.
You all walks of life over there. Everybody you could think of was over there, was in that camp.
Yeah,
There was a few American soldiers there too.
yeah. And they were basically, when the Germans were capturing these guys, you have to keep in mind that all through Europe there were similar camps like this that had captured Americans, captured civilians, captured Russians, and basically what they were doing is they were working them to death. A good example of that is like the rail car that we have that features Fritzy for Charles. A lot of these camps were designed to basically work people to death, and that was one way that they would exterminate them. And so the sight of going into this, in just Ordrecht, that camp alone, tens of thousands of people died in that camp. It was a really awful place.
I don't know whether anybody's seen, they had a segment on television about that camp.
Yeah.
I don't know whether many people saw it. And it actually showed the condition there. People then walked on stone bone. Actually, men died on starvation. It's hard to explain, but
Yeah. From the bottom of our hearts, I want to say thank you so much for being part of the round table and sharing your experiences with all of us today. Please give a round of applause